hell. Telling his fish story? Yeah, they've got the proof. Got the actual fish on. A big fish.
Yeah.
Did they keep it? I would have liked to see the barracuda. Oh.
They kept them.
There's a new movie called about barracuda. Oh no, I think it's about piranhas. A new movie about that.
Oh, really?
That we made. It's the 35th anniversary of Jaws. Well,
35 years.
You know who's in it is, because I could have sworn I saw the trailer and it looked like Richard Richardson with a fawn and all that. Oh my God. And I guess they didn't find the old movie. Oh yeah. They found the junkyard. Oh, he's not at Universal Studios anymore? Who's two? Oh, I love it.
I know, but it's...
Yeah, right. Tell me all about it.
It's the hot sauce.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, internet.
Oh, it's Mary.
The Mary Show.
Okay, Peter Pan. Thank you, sir. I don't think you're going to win for that either.
I think it is. Yes, it is. Mike, need your ear. How you doing? I think we're expecting Henry, aren't we?
He is here.
Oh, he is here. Oh my gosh, my fountain went upside down.
That's
Not a good. That's not a good sign. That's not a good sign.
I'm
Welcome.
afraid.
Howdy.
Very
How are you?
afraid.
Good, how are you?
Good. Nice haircut.
I did get my hair.
I gotta get mine.
No, I
cut.
didn't look. I knew you guys would be.
Do it every...
For Thursday. I didn't
Yeah,
look.
thank goodness. All right, are we ready? All righty. All right, we'll call this special session of the Fountain Hills Town Council to order. Roll call, please, Beth.
Mayor Schlum,
Here.
Vice Mayor Brown,
Here.
Councilmember Cantino,
Here.
Councilmember Leger,
Here.
Councilmember Hanson, Councilmember Elke,
Here.
Councilmember Dickey. Here.
All right. Welcome, everyone, and remind anyone in the public that wishes to speak on our one agenda item tonight to follow the same process. Fill out a speaker card there and bring it up to Bev, and you'll have 3 minutes at least to speak, so don't rush. And we'll move on to the regular agenda. Item 1, discussion with possible directions to staff regarding the Town of Fountain Hills fiscal year 2010-11 budget. The council may address any or all items contained in the budget document and initiate any changes prior to the adoption of the final budget. And again, we're in special session as opposed to our typical second Tuesday work study so that we can make some additional progress towards the budget and also allow for public input if there is any. So, Mary, welcome. Thank you.
Honorable Mayor, members of the council, based on last week's discussion of the budget, I put together a small PowerPoint to just walk us through a number of the items that were brought up last week. The first process is the whole budget methodology. The town has traditionally prepared a line item budget at the department level. When you look at your budget document, you'll notice if you look on page 92, that's the typical, 91, that's the typical line item budget by department that has been the traditional way that governments have done budgeting. Last year, the town began moving towards development of what's called a performance outcome-based budget on a program level. The process is being implemented over a number of years so that we would be able to incorporate the strategic plan into the process. Performance budgeting links planning to achieve goals and objectives, budgeting to ensure that resources are made available to carry out those plans, measuring to assess progress and to link resources actually used to the results achieved, and finally reporting to present progress achieved and the impact on future efforts. From the program level budgeting, it sets programs as the basis for budgeting appropriations rather than departments, as we've done in the past. It shifts the focus from line item budgeting to budgeting based on programs. It's the basis for facilitating a cost allocation system and determining the true cost of service provision. And finally, it creates greater transparency and fiscal accountability. The performance measures form that's incorporated in one whole section of your budget is there to answer the following questions. What is the purpose of this program? And this is the form I'm talking about. In the service delivery area marked number 1, the service delivery plan is what is the purpose of this program? The second question it answers is how will this purpose be achieved? The third, what are the key results or outcomes that are expected to be produced? Those two questions are answered by the activities and outcomes section of the budget, marked 2 and 3. And finally, how do we measure what we've done? And the two measures that we've chosen to use are productivity measures and quality measures. An example of a productivity measure for our accounting program might be something like the number of accounts payable checks issued annually. It's basically something that's just counting the activities being performed by a program. A quality measure for the same program might be something like number of voided checks processed due to errors. How well are we accomplishing the tasks that we're setting out to do? I hope this gives the council and the public who have never been exposed to program-based budgeting an idea of why we're trying to make that transition from department and line item to program-based budget. And if there's any questions, I'd be happy to address those.
Thank you very much. Council, any questions on the overview here? Mary gave. Thank you, Mary. I don't think we have anyone from the public yet, correct? Okay.
If you'd like, I can move on.
I think so. Thank you.
One of the second issues that council mentioned at last week's session was the issue of the comprehensive fee schedule. In the past, the town departments each individually brought forward resolutions establishing assorted fees for the town. The problem with doing that in that manner was that we had contradictory fee schedules. So we might have a planning department resolution that said photocopies were 25 cents a piece, but the public works fee schedule said that photocopies were 10 cents a piece. 2 years ago, we incorporated the comprehensive fee schedule into the budget document so that the public would be able to go to one place and find out all of the fees that the town charged. What you see in the budget document this year is a comprehensive fee schedule with minor increases. It's our intent to do a thorough comprehensive user fee study during the course of 2010-11. And so we made minimal changes to the fee schedule just to accommodate a number of just small minor changes to existing fees. and to incorporate two new fees, one in the area called fire safety fees, and a second one that's commercial photocopy fees. In the past, the building safety department, when someone would come in for a building permit, would assess fees for building inspection and things of that sort. All of the inspections that are done by the fire department for things like sprinkler systems and plan review of sprinkler systems were done without charge. What we're doing is adding to the building permit process fees for those types of inspections and plan reviews. The other fee that we're adding is a commercial photocopy fee. In the past, there has been only one photocopy fee section, and we felt that it was important to distinguish photocopy fees requested by residents for their own personal use from the photocopying being requested by commercial enterprises for profit-making uses. And so that has also been incorporated into the fee schedule that you're looking at. Any questions about the fees?
Thank you very much, Mary. So this will be our opportunity to go through the fee schedule and ask questions, and they were highlighted, the differences there in yellow.
The fees that have either been added or modified slightly are highlighted in yellow, so it should be easy to identify.
Okay, good, thank you. And those are all start on page 336 or 7 in the budget. I'll get it started. I had a question, and it comes from, and I don't need an answer tonight, but just a recollection from a member of the public, I think it was Mr. Baldwin, spoke about the rental fee at the community center going up for his particular organization, and I was under the expectation that the cost was going down based on our now dividing up the number of hours that are, you don't have to take out as big of a chunk anymore, but it was clarified, and apparently he was correct. His cost was actually going up for utilizing the same amount of time. And I know it's not fair to bring up one example and ask you to speak to that, because you probably don't even know about it, since you're newer over the community center now. But as far as the fee schedule related to community center use, I thought for the most part everything was at least staying the same cost, but incrementally was going down if people utilized less time.
Yes, Mayor Schlum, I did happen to be at that council meeting, as I am at most of them where that gentleman spoke. I'm not all that familiar with this particular situation, but what has really changed, as I understand, is fundamentally the fee structure is the same, but what they used to rent out was blocks of time. Now they're limiting those to an hour, because what they found out was people typically weren't using that whole time, but they would stay for that time. And typically at the end of a meeting, they would break up and maybe have an ongoing conversation, or if it was an HOA, there'd be one or two people hanging around, but the bulk of folks would have already left because they wanted to get their full block of time. And so it was felt like that there would be greater utilization of the facility and perhaps the opportunity to generate some additional revenue by renting it on an hour. I can't speak to this particular gentleman's situation because I'm not sure which group he represented, I don't recall. But there are provisions for 3 different tiers in the fee structure. 2 of those are the most popular. One is the Tier 2, which is residents or organizations that are not-for-profit kind of thing. The third category is for commercial, so there's a differentiation in fees. So if you are a local user and a not-for-profit organization, you get that reduced rate. In his case, I believe he said it was $90 when in the past it had been $40. Well, there's also a caveat in there that says if you're using it and you're a not-for-profit group up to 6 times and more, there's a discount that takes place if you're using that particular room. He may not be aware of that. So I will go back and follow up with him specifically about that.
It was the Fountain Hills Community Chorus.
Okay. I suspect they would fall into that category where they would have a discount opportunity.
Okay. Because that did surprise me, because it seemed like it would benefit most people having a little bit shorter, instead of having to the ballrooms were a minimum of 4 hours, I think. The classrooms were a minimum of 2, now they're an hour.
Yeah, and most meetings are an hour or two typically, so the notion of having it for 4 hours really wasn't working in the staff's mind very well.
All right. I have some others, but I'll let others ask any questions of the fee schedule, at least at this point. Any other council members have questions or clarifications or suggestions on that? Councilmember Hanson?
Thank you. Starting on page 338, the cost of CDs of town documents like the town code is the same as a hard copy, and that's $25. And that seemed kind of high because it certainly takes less staff time to burn a CD, and it certainly doesn't use paper. So I thought the $25 was kind of excessive.
That's under the document CD of council meeting, or is it a different,
Yeah,
or
documents,
other
it's-
materials?
And then you'll see like town code and zoning ordinance, it's $25 for the CD or a hard copy. And that's not a change?
Or it's in yellow.
Honorable Mayor, members of the council, what we were trying to do was make it consistent throughout because some CDs were $25 and other CDs weren't. So now it's the production of CDs for numerous types of things are all $25.
But I see
So
a
some of them
CD of a
increase.
council meeting is different than the CD of like the town code. I don't know, I just thought that that was very high.
So right now,
They should all be showing as $25.
they are, except for annual budget's 45. So I don't know if that's 2 CDs or, I don't think it is.
At the rate it's going, it might be a volume of CDs.
All right, so Councilmember Hanson, your thoughts are $25 for CDs is too much?
That was my thought.
And to account for this, I know most of the costs here, you're looking to cover costs, and obviously CDs and even the paper might be, not $25, but you have staff time and those types of things I suspect you're looking to quantify in your cost. Were CDs less before, do you know?
They were less.
Okay.
I think this is really an interim state because we really have not done the user fee analysis to determine what the true cost of providing a sorted product is. So if the council would like to see this deferred until the cost study is done, we could easily do that.
Well, just to point out, most of these documents are free on the website
Yes.
to be burned to somebody's private CD collection of council meetings. But as well as the council meetings are available online, you can just right-click and save it rather than play it. But I think it's fair for us to make sure we're just at least covering our cost. But I'm not sure if this user fee study is going to drill down on that further, or is this already what you expect our costs are?
Mayor, members of the council, it's really hard to judge what the true cost is until you really go through the motions of conducting a cost allocation plan and a user fee study. Because what we're doing now is trying to do best guessing about what the value of something is in the marketplace rather than base it on cost. We're looking at it and says, how much are people willing to pay for a CD of a council meeting?
Sure.
And rather than say, how much is the cost of the provision of that service?
I think whatever information citizens want, it'd be a value add for them to have it from a council and town perspective. It's just there's obviously some staff time and effort, be it a half, 15 minutes, 30 minutes, whatever, to mail it or leave it at a counter. I'm sure that's what you're looking to cover. That's a good explanation. Councilmember Hanson?
On 339, there's a $30 fee for an Adopt a Street sign. And I guess I wasn't realizing that we do require the volunteer to pay for their sign. That just kind of jumped out at me this year.
Mayor, members of the council, what we basically do is pass through the cost of the production of the sign because we have it sent out to be designed and produced. to the person who's participating. So there's not a markup of any kind, it's just the cost of the sign itself.
One of our goals this year was to expand this program into residential areas, and it just seemed like, we're getting citizens and business owners to volunteer to clean up our streets, and then we're saying, by the way, you have to pay for your own sign. I just thought it might be nice to come up with an alternative method that we're not asking our volunteers to pay for their sign as an incentive.
Well, they are paying for it, if we're paying for it. They're paying for it, whether they're buying the sign or they're buying the sign. I mean, somehow the town's paying for it with their dollars, one way or another. We could call it a subsidy.
Yeah.
But that's something we could, so you're thinking eliminate that cost, just absorb it as a town cost to encourage the program? It'd just be cost out of, it's the old balancing act. But I think, you want to encourage citizens to be more involved if that's a goal, and maybe that's something to consider.
Yeah.
Councilmember Dickey.
Mayor, thank you. I just wanted to differentiate maybe between businesses and residential, because it could sort of be like an ad.
It's true, it is an advertisement for businesses in particular, but it's also a good community service.
If the council would like to see two fee schedules, one for residential as the program expands, and one for commercial, because the commercial is really treated as a commercial advertisement.
Councilmember Leger?
Yeah, without obsessing on this particular item, the rationale for the charge, whether it's to a commercial or to a residential, is that there's a high turnover. And I remembered having this conversation several years ago, because in my neighborhood there was a sign, and then it was a commercial vendor, and then they had their name on it, and then it changed, and every year it changed. So is the town to absorb that cost every time it turns over? And it could be quite costly, because you're constantly taking the sign down, which is labor intensive, bringing it into the shop, changing the name of the person that's doing such and such and so and so. So that's the rationale for how it's been in the past and why there's been a charge for it, because it is labor intensive, and the fact that you may be charging someone may be an incentive for them to continue to stay involved. But I'm not opposed to having a cost for commercial, because it is in fact an advertising and then a freebie for the resident. But if we go that route, we may want to have a generic sign for the resident rather than the Leger family, and then 6 months later it changes and it's the Schlum family and the Hansen family, or whatever the case may be. So I think there's a catch-22, but there's definitely a cost associated with it. And there are a lot of signs out there throughout the town. So I certainly would be open to a lower fee schedule for a resident, or maybe experiment with it to see what the turnover and the cost is. I, for one, am very interested in adopting the street in my neighborhood, and it's something I recommended in our in our retreat. However, I don't have a need to have my name on a sign, so therefore I probably wouldn't be asking for a sign, so the cost would be zero to me and zero to the town. So I think there's several ways of looking at it, but definitely there's a cost associated with it based on turnover and production. Thank you, Mayor.
Councilmember Cantillo.
I think that the turnover comes every year when they don't renew their business license. And I don't know who's handling it now, but it was being checked quite a bit to see who does or who doesn't. And that's how we had the turnover, was once a year on the business license.
Okay. Well, let's make sure we don't lose folk touch on these items that are being brought up. If there's perhaps consideration of altering or changing these fees, maybe we could see a motion to that effect, or if there's or if the dialogue has clarified things, or folks don't feel burdened to change things at this time and wait for the user fee schedule. I'll just consider your silence on that. Kind of in that respect, we'll wait for the user fee study to determine if there's suggested changes on those things. But if you feel like something should be reduced or increased or whatever the case, feel free to make a motion. Anything else on user fees before I go back into mine?
You can go back to yours, and I'll go back to mine.
Okay. The Ramadas Can't remember where those were. I don't think have changed. I think I'm there yet. There we go. 349, 350. I was just going to ask, maybe Marcus, how is that working out? Do we have a lot of Ramada use? I know rentals, the Citizen Fountain Hills, residential rate is less than the non-residential rate, but not to too great of an extent. Do we have many non-residents reserving Ramadas or in any of the parks? And also, obviously, they're town parks, or the uses of other groups holding things infringing. Do we expect on others' use that are citizens that obviously both make reservations? But have we had any feedback over those things? And what are your thoughts on the fee structure, for example, on the medium-sized Ramada, $30 for a citizen for up to 4 hours? Probably a pretty common rental if there is one. How is it going with the Ramada rentals?
Mayor Schlum and members of the council. It depends a little bit on the location of the Ramada. For instance, on one extreme, we have the Kiwanis Shelter, which is next to the Splash Park, which is, not surprisingly, our most popular Ramada. We could probably rent it at twice that price. It stays extremely busy, birthday parties, etc. Less busy are the ones that are kind of on the west side of the park. And an interesting dilemma, as we've increased the number of shelters, based on the demand that we have, people are less likely now to rent than they used to be, because now they kind of roll the dice, and if they walk up and there's not somebody who's already reserved that shelter, then they simply locate there and have their picnic and then go on without paying the fee. So it has not kept pace with, as we've added the shelters, and the revenue has not kept pace with that. But the bottom line is, are people using them? Yes. Based on the feedback we've gotten from the staff and what we see, they are staying extremely busy. But they're not always generating additional revenue.
And also, as you mentioned, if they're not reserved and you walk up to them, people feel free to utilize them until someone else who has reserved the space time comes up, right?
Yes, we actually have a system where, if you look on the front of the Ramadas, there is a little box there, and if the facility's been reserved, that is noted there and the time is noted, so people actually have the option when they come up. We did that mostly to help the people that did have the reservation, so somebody didn't come up and set up right before they got there, kind of thing, which tended to create sometimes a scene. Now it has the opposite effect, though. If somebody comes up and knows it's not reserved, then they don't have an opportunity to have a picnic and not have somebody else show up and take the space.
Okay, good. On the community center now, unless somebody had something on the Ramadas. I do. Okay, thank you. Councilmember Contino.
I noticed that the one by the Splash Park gets used a lot by the people. And I know, is there any way we can curtail of going up and asking these people? Because a lot of them bring their lunches and everything else, and I see 2 and 3 families sitting in there during the day, every day. How do we curtail some of that so they have to pay a fee?
Mayor Schlum, council members, I think the best system we have is the one we have in place. It basically will indicate whether or not the shelter's been reserved, so that it avoids the confrontation. If somebody's there and has simply started a picnic there, and we've got a reservation sign out, when that family comes, we also ask them to bring their permit along. And I don't recall years now since we've actually had an incident between 2 users where the person wouldn't vacate. We had to step in and have law enforcement or somebody step in. So most people are pretty good at understanding, and they simply point to the permit that they have, or point to the kiosk where the reservation slip is there to show folks that they're the people that do in fact have it reserved and they paid for that.
So when Councilmember Contino, on that splash pad Ramada, when you mentioned people are going up and being asked?
No, they're just in there using it all day. There was one lady I called in on Saturday, was there for 4 hours. But she had 4 or 5 different people with her, and they already had their lunches and everything else, and nobody had the Ramada.
Yeah, there really isn't any way that I know of to prevent that, other than, and I don't know necessarily that we should, it does provide some shade, and as long as it's not rented by somebody else, we really don't have any objection to people going ahead and using it. That's the same with any Ramada that we have.
So any of the Ramadas, benches, anything could be utilized at any time unless it's been reserved and paid for by someone else?
Correct.
Okay. Do you have another? Nope. On the community center extra service fees, if make a note, I can wait patiently for the user fee study to be done, but if, again, if these spaces are being utilized, the audio-visual equipment, microphones, overheads, the screens and such, I know can make a meeting much richer and more beneficial, especially to our service groups and others that are doing great things for the town. If we can look at that in light of the cost, because, if they're paying $40 for a room or whatever, they're doubling their cost sometimes by wanting equipment to make their meetings more effective. I don't know if it's because the equipment's in such demand we don't have enough equipment, or if we're just looking at the wear and tear and having to replace it based on the use. But I know the value of having an overhead and a screen rather than just talking at a podium is much more beneficial when they have presenters and such. So I'd like to see if there's a way to bring those down, particularly the screens and the overhead projector. The video projector, that's a special piece of equipment for real large, like the movies. Is that correct?
Yes, it's also, Mayor Slum, a very specialized product. I believe the replacement of the bulb alone on that is $500.
Yeah, so maybe that makes sense. But if there are the overhead projector and those things, I just want to, if people are going to be utilizing the space and have meetings, make it as effective as they can if they don't have their own equipment. But it's not overly burdensome. Now that I realize that video projector of 75 really stood out, but that's really for movies and such, not really for a business presentation. Good. Councilmember Dickey?
Mayor, thank you. Mark, what role did the Parks and Rec, the commission, the Community Center Commission, and others have in creating these funds, these other commissions that are officially commissions from the town?
Mayor Slum, Councilmember Dickey, I really can't answer that. I don't know how involved they were. I know they haven't been involved since the fees were actually brought forward. I don't know what their level of involvement was previous to that. I can speculate, though, that I know they have been working on a discussion of fees for some time about the building, so I suspect they were involved.
And Mayor, then, would you think that they are supportive of these fees right here?
I suspect so, only in the case that I haven't heard anything against the fees from any of the commissioners, and I've attended now meetings for both seniors and the community center.
I think it was a year and a half ago when they came forward, and they went through most everything. I think it came from them, and that's probably the same method. In another 6 months, they're going to go through after 2 years to look at them again.
Certainly.
Councilmember Hanson?
Having attended some of their meetings, I know some of them feel that we're very competitive with the Valley, so they felt the fees were justified. But I think along that same line, we need to look at the declining rentals at the community center and try and get a handle on, because that's been happening now for a number of years, get a handle of why that's really happening. And if the fees do have something to do with it, then maybe it's more than, we might be competitive with the Valley, but if we're losing our own people, I think it's something we need to incorporate into the schedule.
And I know they did that to some extent. They did reduce the cost for the rooms through this 1 hour thing in particular, and instead of 4 hours, 2 hours in the ballrooms. But that's always, we want to make sure the community center is being used, and it's particularly by organizations that increase the quality of life here. Also balancing out, there's cost to turning over rooms and those types of things that you have to absorb in your budget, and we have to find funds for that are not in abundance. All right, no problem. All right, anything else on any of the fee schedule? Councilmember Hanson.
Thank you. Mary, on page 340, it says there's a new temporary vendor permit fee for $50, and it says it's for special events only. Now, I know that, like, in the fairs, because there's a special event permit, they're exempt from getting, like, the business license. So what type of vendor fee is this one?
This would be in lieu of the traditional business license process, which is what we now require the one-time vendor for the fair to go through. This would be an accelerated process. But we wanted to call it something totally different because it wouldn't go through code and, the building and code checks and things that a business located in town would have to go through. So they could basically come up to the counter, pay a fee, fill out an application form, and get their temporary vendor permit.
So what type of activity do you see this type of permit being used?
Typically for things like the fair, where the vendor is here for one day or over the course of one weekend.
But not participating under the umbrella of the Chamber's event?
Correct.
Okay. And then along that line, on 341, we're looking at the special event application fees, $500 for commercial and $100 for a charitable organization. And I wondered if we wanted to look at maybe having maybe a third category for some of our nonprofits, car club, anything like that, that would come forward with these little mini events that we're trying to promote, to enhance the community, that perhaps that could be even a smaller fee, if it's something small taking place on the median, or to encourage that type of activity.
Mayor, members of the council, I know that the Recreation Department, through the course of this year, one of their goals is to look at the whole application process for special events, and one of the things that they are considering are more tiers.
Okay, so this one might not capture everything we might assume. A charitable organization, nonprofits that aren't necessarily, raising money for other things, add value, and we're looking at reducing their expense to have an event occur, which would, again, be a nice thing to have. All right, and the $100, just to speak to that of the charitable organization, is that something you think that's being reviewed as well, if those organizations are raising funds for probably community events that we're looking to want to reduce?
Nodding, yes.
Okay, good, excellent. Councilmember Elke.
Hi, Mary. Quick question for you. On the fees that are being assessed for the waste collection, the recycling, we have the $50 application per truck, $50 application, and then $750 per truck annual fee for the solid waste, and then $50 per truck annual fee for the recycling. What was the rationale behind charging such a substantially lower price for the recycling? I'm sure there was a reason behind it. I was just curious if you could explain that a little more in detail.
Mayor, members of the council, one of the reasons for the increased fees for those heavy type trucks was because of the damage to the streets that those trucks do. And so we felt that it was important to assess a higher fee for those kinds of activities, but we also didn't want to discourage recycling. And so even though the trucks are pretty much the same size and weight, we made that decision to, in effect, keep that fee lower to encourage the continued recycling in town.
Mary, was there concern that if you charge the same fee for the recycling trucks, that the vendors or the providers would no longer do recycling, or was there some discussion, or what information did you receive?
What we were fearful of is that they would increase the cost of recycling.
What page is that one on?
340.
It's 340. And again, these are our fees. If you think it needs to be adjusted, we need to speak to it. Although we try to obviously empower user groups to go through it and make their best suggestions for us. 340. Okay, so that is a change. I don't recall what it was the year before, but
There was no discrimination between any types of businesses. They were all $50.
I see. Councilman Rauke.
Mary, what was the fee last year then for solid waste per truck, the annual fee?
There was no per truck fee.
Okay, so we're charging, this is a new fee for $750 per truck, and then also the recycling fee per truck is now $50 as well.
That would be correct.
So it was just the application fee was all there was?
It was issued in the company name, so it didn't matter if they had 100 trucks in town or one truck in town, they paid one fee for the company.
Do we know the number of trucks that each company has, and I mean, how much money we're talking about here per company?
I'm not sure, Raymond may have, just from the discussions, looking for, you know, a single source trash hauler, but we didn't get into that.
Councilmember Dickey?
Yeah, Mayor, and I'm not sure the ramifications of this with what we're going through. This isn't something that I remember talking about when we're talking about the RFPs and all that, so I don't have any answers for that, and I can see that Raymond's not here, but I don't know how this is affected or not affected by the RFP, because I don't, you know, whoever comes in on that, which is tomorrow, is going to be reacting off of what the RFP was. Rick, I don't know if you know anything more about it.
Rick,
No.
on the,
We didn't put anything like this in the RFP, I don't think, so that's, I'm just trying to, okay. Thanks.
I get it. All right, any other? Councilmember Alke?
So Mayor, am I to understand then if, I mean, certainly the jury's still out as far as the town going to a single trash hauler. If we go to a single trash hauler, are these fees to then not apply to whoever that single trash hauler is? And if it's not to apply, why? If our concern is the wear and tear and that sort of thing that's on the roadway, are we going to assess the $750 per truck for that single vendor? And if we don't go to a single vendor, you know, these fees, the distinction between the recycling and the waste, I think the disparity is pretty significant. And if, again, we don't go to a single trash hauler and we're concerned about wear and tear, and this is essentially to try and recoup those monies, I think we should have equal fees for the recycling trucks as well, or something be a little bit closer, because if we're trying to recoup it, then whether it's a recycling truck or it's a waste truck, it really shouldn't matter.
As far as the wear and tear on
Correct.
the roads?
Correct.
I think what Mary had mentioned, assuming probably something, that the value of recycling was probably inherent within the rate as well, the value to the community for recycling. Is that what you expected? That's what I think most people would assume looking at this, but
That is correct.
I'm not sure.
We were anticipating that the council's policy would be not to discourage recycling.
Mary, you're not calling this a subsidy, are you?
I am calling this a subsidy.
You are calling this a recycling subsidy? Okay, thank you.
but on the RFP, would the fee schedule, how would the fee schedule not be included in a provider being granted the right to be the single hauler? It would be included, wouldn't it?
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, the RFP is to select a single provider, but that provider is still subject to all the business licensing requirements of the town, so
Okay.
whatever the licensing requirements are, they'll have to pay them the same as anybody else would.
Okay. That was part of your question, I believe. That's what that was. I was curious. Okay, that's what I would have thought. These would still apply to that. But your Councilmember Alke's question is, do we want to have them at $750 and $50, or perhaps another number altogether? Councilmember Dickey?
And Mayor, maybe we could find out what the nuts and bolts of this decision on these figures. Maybe we'll have to do that before we can actually adopt everything, or because I'm a little unsure about this rationale. I don't remember the conversation if I was there, so I would, because that is a big difference. And if we do go to a single trash hauler, it would be, one day of that, one day of the other. So I need more information about this too.
Okay. Councilmember Hanson?
Do we have a concern that this was not in the RFP and now the people that have submitted bids are going, we didn't know about this extra cost? after the fact. It's kind of awkward.
I see. We had fees last year, but just the $50 application fee, not a per truck fee.
That is correct.
Yeah,
But
so-
these fees have been published on the internet from the time that the tentative budget was published, which is a few months now.
I think that's a good question. So it just, again, along the lines of what Councilmember Dickey, let's figure out what is known. And if we need to get Raymond to help us with that or understand what's communicated through the RFP, this would be relevant if, obviously.
And since this is going to be an approved document, should we maybe wait on those until we know how we're going forward?
Yeah. There you go. Oh, Town Manager Davis.
Mayor, this type of fee, its relevance to actually providing revenue to repair streets is just not, there's not going to be that kind of connection, because the money you're going to generate from this type of fee obviously is not going to go a long way in probably satisfying that need. But fees like these usually are associated with the regulatory function of the town as it applies to contracts, administering contracts. So there are other costs associated with these types of programs besides paving roads. There is the time and the staff time and other costs associated with administering contracts, making sure things are being done the way they are or are done according to the contract. I think probably it's advisable that we take another look at these fees, and it might be relevant to compare them to perhaps what some of our other cities in the valley are charging at this time. But I don't want to leave the impression that, well, the entire reason for charging a fee like this is to cover road costs. I think that's almost kind of a $750 won't pave me from here to Councilmember Elke. So it won't cover one hole. So I think what we need to do is just do a little bit more homework in that, and we'll get you some more information on these fees and move along. But I appreciate the feedback.
All right, so it sounds like most people are in that train of thought here. Councilmember Contino?
I think that the fee for per truck of $50 is really low. I mean, it's $7.50 for a recycler and $50 per truck. Now, you're talking about doing repairs for the streets. How can you get $50 for that when you get the cold patch? It's probably going to cost you more than that. That's what I'm thinking. And these companies pay higher fees in the areas that they're in when they contract out. And that's the thing I look at. If we're paying $7.50 for one truck, we're punishing him, but the other guy gets off for $50. And he's here more than the recycler is. And the other thing is, if we're going to be doing that, we should raise that for the simple reason we got semis that are here 5, 6, 7 days a week, and we have a lot of off-road or offloading dumpsters that are around all the way straight through. So we got a tremendous amount of truck traffic coming in this town, so we're going to penalize one company for everybody else. So we better get some fees up there, because the roads are going to be needing repairs.
Good, thank you. So it sounds like council wants to keep it where it was until we understand more. Is that what I'm hearing?
Would you like us to bring back additional information at the next council meeting on the 27th? 17th? 17th.
Councilmember Leger, or Councilmember Brown?
Thank you. If I had filled out the RFP and did not know of these fees, I would yell foul. I think we need to back off on the fees altogether until we see how the single hauler situation works out. But if you think through the contracting process and the bidding process, and if they knew of the fees going into it, it would be a little different than slapping them in the face after they put the proposal together. So I have to say we need to put these on the side burner until we see how it turns out tomorrow and down the road.
Councilmember Dickey?
Mayor, thank you. The other thing, what Councilmember Contino said reminded me, because I was forgetting about the fact that they are collecting
commercial and from dumpsters, and maybe it had, I'm just trying to get to the rationale of it on how it got to be such a big figure. Maybe that's it, because when they go to the commercial areas, there's probably, it's not going to be as often that you're going to see a dumpster for recycling, so maybe it has something to do with that too. So I think it's just true that we need more information.
Yes. Councilmember Elke?
Mayor, if the trash haulers that are putting in a bid for this don't already know about this fee, I would imagine if they're paying attention, they'll probably now know about this. So I think it's important that we do remove those fees until we get some additional information or find out perhaps where the council is going to be going as far as the whether single or multi-trash hauler, because it would have, I think, a chilling effect on somebody wanting to do business in town, especially some of the smaller trash haulers, if we're going to be hitting them with a $750 per truck fee. If you have 10 trucks or 20 trucks that are hauling here in town, hauling waste, we're talking about $15,000 additional dollars a year if you have 20 trucks. So I think it would have an effect of squeezing out perhaps some of the smaller businesses that are doing business here. So I would like to see perhaps those fees for both the recycling as well as the solid waste collection, that those annual fees be removed and then after perhaps next year, next budget time, if the council wants to consider it then, to do it then, because I think the effect on the budget is going to be nominal, as Mr. Davis was saying.
Councilmember Dickey?
Well, Mayor, as far as removing them, maybe just keeping them the way they were, because I'm assuming that was the information that we had when we went out for the RFP. Plus, there's a lot of trucks, there's a lot of commercial, and there's a lot of condos that just have dumpsters that are still going to be doing what they're doing now, no matter what. So if we can keep it the way it was until we're not going to do this till the 17th, right? For sure.
Yeah.
I mean, we don't have to do this tonight. So I would agree that it should be, we need more information, but I don't want to remove them if that's something that's been there all the while, because there's a lot of trucks and a lot of garbage collection that's not going to be affected by the RFP situation.
So I'll leave it the way it was.
Mayor.
And I think it was also in one category, I believe. Councilmember Brown?
Thank you. Let's have a conversation about putting the fees on the commercial trucks and not the residential trucks. I think that's a conversation we could have, separating it in commercial, residential, as we have in several other cases. They aren't part of the RFP, and the little bit of income won't hurt us.
Yep. All right, so to be clear, are we okay with leaving it where it is currently, which would not be what's highlighted in yellow? It would be $50 application fee for either solid or recycled waste collection and removal, and no annual truck fees, per truck fees.
That would be,
Until we hear something on the 17th that changes all of our minds to it, that this is exactly the right plan. Or
Without the yellow.
without the yellow.
Without an actual official motion, we'll move in that direction. That
All right.
absent of that. Okay.
Thank you. Councilmember Leger.
Everyone had something to say about this, so I think I'll
better.
jump in myself. I don't want to feel left out. The way I'm viewing this is just a proposal based on our current situation, not considering single trash hauler, because we don't know whether we're going in that direction or not. Is that fair to say?
the fee schedule was put together back in September of last year, so it was prior to the talk about the single trash hauler.
So the question for me really is that if we don't move with a single trash hauler and we're back to, business as usual, how do we want to deal with that? Do we want to have an application fee as well as a truck fee? And as Councilman Elke meant, maybe we need we maybe need to look at the discrepancy between the 750 and the 50. But I'm just looking at this kind of just, it's there in the absence of anything else happening, and philosophically it's a proposal to say we need to start recovering these costs. Now granted, part of the rationale for going to single trash hauler, whether we go there or not, is to recover cost. So if we're recovering costs by minimizing the number of trucks on the street, then perhaps there's no need for this 750. But we have really two very separate scenarios. So I just thought I'd toss that in. And just in general, historically, you may recall, it was either this council or previous council, I think it was my first year on council, it was a real effort to lower fees across the board for anything to do with environment, like for solar permits or just things in general. So I think that's kind of where the rationale came for reducing fees in solar, low watering landscape, so forth and so on, just to encourage folks to do that. I would have to say that this is a significant gap here between 750 and 50, but I just want to throw that on the table because I think we're asking for rationale. And Councilperson Dickey may recall that any time we talked environmental and we start our environmental committee, one of the bullet points on a slide presentation was to review and reduce fees to encourage enhancing and sustaining the environment, and I think this kind of was tagged along with that and anything relative to solar. So I just want to add that to the rationale. But going back to where we're at here, is two scenarios. So I think this council needs to decide if we go with a single trash hauler, do we remove this? I'm kind of hearing yes. And if we do not go with a single trash hauler, should there be a fee and what should it be and how close should they be between trash versus recycling, leaving out commercial, which is a whole part of this whole scenario. I mean, maybe you can have a separate category for that. So, thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Everybody's had a say on waste trucks collections. And I am, the most serious issue, obviously, is the wrestling exhibition charge of $100 a day. Have we ever had anybody pay that?
Boxing?
Boxing we've had, that's right.
Long time ago.
Before we were town, maybe. That's close. Just kidding, I don't need that answer. We need WWE out here, obviously. It's very inexpensive for them. Yeah, Councilmember Leger?
Are we through with the...
Yes, trash, on to whatever else on the fee schedule.
We'll trash that one. Mary, on page 346, landscape plan review. I noticed that's in yellow, and that's a relatively new ordinance we passed here. So I'm wondering, is yellow because it's relatively new and it wasn't on the previous fee schedule, or if there have been some adjustments made to what we agreed to when we passed that ordinance?
Mayor, members of the council, the highlights also indicate things that have come before council during the course of this last year but weren't incorporated in the fee schedule last year, and that would be things like the development fee and the landscape plan review.
So this probably goes hand in hand with the discussion we had when we passed the ordinance. When some council members may recall, we were looking at xeriscaping and low water, so forth and so on. And some of the comments I've received from the community is that we're encouraging zero landscape, and even if you look at the ordinance, the plan requirements don't require a landscape architect. It could be a very, very simple plan, because we were trying to get down the cost of plan review. And I do recall that when we passed this ordinance, we had stated that, you know, these numbers were out there, and Bob may recall, and we could possibly review them. I've received a number of comments from people that are trying to do low-budget, zero-scaping landscape that just can't afford $2,500 for a deposit. And I'm not sure if Bob wants to address that or not, and the rationale for all of that. I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Welcome, Bob.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. The $2,500 is a refundable deposit, and that is only required if someone is in the middle of construction and they want to get a certificate of occupancy having not completed their landscaping. Once they put their landscaping in, they get that back. Joe Public that wants to just do a landscaping permit doesn't have to pay that.
Okay. Very good. Thank you. I wonder if that's a change from what we had discussed.
That's actually what you decided when we adopted that ordinance.
We must have revised something, because I actually know some folks that just living in a home, put in a significant landscape change, and they had to put a deposit down for that. So maybe that was just wires got switched on that. But if that's the case, then I'm certainly comfortable with that if it's new construction. Thank you.
Councilmember Hanson.
On 349, on the new fire safety fees, and how, a little insight on how these came about? Probably specifically the two annual inspections for residential group care and the commercial business safety surveys.
Mayor, Council, I'm really not the person who should be answering it, but I think I can answer it for you. We've discussed this for many, many years, probably the better part of the 14 years that I've been here, but we just never pulled the trigger on doing this, and we felt this was a great opportunity at this time to try to introduce some form of cost recovery for the fire marshal's office. So when we decided that we would put it in the budget this year, or attempt to put it in with your permission, Chief Roberts did a all-inclusive study through the Arizona Fire Marshals Association. So we queried every single fire department in the state of Arizona who charges fees. And if I remember correctly, I think we were the only fire department community who did not charge fees. And then we also took a real close look at Scottsdale fees because our prevention bureau, it mirrors their prevention bureaus quite closely. And so we looked at that and we picked out the services that we felt that we wanted to include in our fee schedule because they were all over the map what fire departments charge as far as not residential, but commercial inspections, hood inspections, alarm inspections, plan review, on and on and on. And so, we narrowed it down to what we thought would be the applicable ones to start with. And then we also looked at the fees, and we kind of came in close to Scottsdale fees, and we felt even the Scottsdale fees were maybe just a little bit high to start with. So we cut, I believe, Scottsdale fees in half, and that's where we came in with our fee projections. So all our fee projections in here are much, much lower than any other community in the state of Arizona.
Are the inspections like for the residential group care, is that a mandated thing?
Yes. Well, like in a residential group care home that's 10 residents or less, they are required by the state to have inspections, and we do go in there and inspect for safety because they do have alarm systems and they do have fire sprinkler systems, so they have to be inspected.
And then for the businesses, is this what you've been doing all along, where you come through and check the fire extinguishers and if boxes are too close?
That's one of the inspections. That's the annual inspection that we do. If a business has a fire alarm in there that is rolled in on top of that one, and if they have a sprinkler system or if they have a hood system, that's rolled in there too. And on hood systems, I believe, and I could be wrong, but I think they're supposed to, by code and by insurance requirements, have their hood inspection done every 6 months. Many of them don't, but and that's where we go in there and try to make sure that they do what they're supposed to be doing in order that they stay in business, because we found throughout our profession that when a business suffers a fire, there's about an 80% chance that they'll never open up again. So we always felt as a fire community that it's imperative upon us to sometime give them a little bit of bad news in order to keep them in business, because we'd rather have them spend a little bit of dollars up front than have a devastating loss to a fire and perhaps not only damage their property but damage the property next to them. But we felt the time was right when building activity was relatively low in town to introduce this new concept, because all these companies that come in town to put in these systems are always just kind of taken aback that we don't charge. So we figured the time was ripe right now to introduce this, come in low, study it for a year or two and see, are our fees applicable? Do they need to go up? Do they need to go down? Do they need to go away? And we feel that this is a great time to do that kind of an analytical study to see if we are correct in our assumptions.
So this is really triggered by what a business might have in their establishment. like
Correct.
the hoods or the
Correct.
alarm systems or something.
Mhm.
So if it's just a law office, for example, would that not have anything in it that would trigger an inspection of this type?
It's a commercial activity, and so he would be required to have one fire extinguisher, and if there's people coming in and out of his office, which I assume there would be, he may be required to have a sign above his door that this door must remain unlocked. And then just general housekeeping, which is a minor issue in most businesses in our community.
But that would still be an annual fee for that type of activity?
Correct. I think that was included into the business license fee, or is that off the fee schedule? It's on the fee schedule. And we do go into every business once a year, and we did look at how many actual businesses we physically go into every year. We know that number, which is a solid number, and then we compared it to the business licenses, and either there's a lot of transient businesses, or there's a lot of businesses in people's homes, or we're missing a lot of places. But we don't think we're missing any storefront business in the town of Fountain Hills. So, it kind of allowed us to ask the question, are we missing something in the town as far as business licenses go? But we really feel that maybe a lot of those licenses are for folks who have businesses in their homes, and we would not inspect their home.
So then do you bill them after the inspection? How does that work?
Members of the council, we're working now to find the most equitable way to transition into it, because our business licenses would be the probably easiest place to tack on that fee, but we need to work with the fire safety office to find out what their inspection schedule has been. So we may have to have short fee years, because some people have already been inspected, others won't come up for inspection until maybe June or July. So we're going to have to work to develop a system to implement this over the course of a year.
Councilmember Elke?
Thank you. Actually, the building that I subleased space in was just subject to an inspection by your department, and very gentlemanly guys that came in there and did the inspection. The question that I have, though, is would this fee apply to each individual business that are perhaps in one building? So, for example, if you had an accountant in one building that was subleasing from the building owner, and you had a law office or you had a dentist's office, would each one of those individual businesses then be responsible for that fee, even though perhaps the building owner is taking care of all the fire?
It's my opinion, if you have a business license, you're subject to the fee in a commercial occupancy. So there could be a building that has 10 different tenants in there with 10 different businesses. There'd be 10 different fees.
So if you had, let's say, give you another example, if you have a realtors and you have a number of the realtors that are their own bosses, so to speak, and maybe they have their own businesses within one building, are they all going to be subject to
I would
this
say no
because
on that.
because they have a business license?
That's a communal office space. I believe that's how we would look at that. It's a communal office space. But if you each had your own standalone, there's a strip mall, and there's 8 different businesses in that strip mall, there will be a $25 fee for each one of those. But if we went into ABC Real Estate and there was 15 or 20 independent realtors in that office, no, it would go to the broker of the business, I guess you would call that person, or the landlord of that building.
I think what I hear Councilmember Elke bring up, and perhaps, or I'm picking up on it, is that if we're not sure how we're going to bill for it yet, it obviously is a cost recovery function that could ultimately save us dollars on our contract for, staffing of firefighters. If we go by a business license, most of the real estate agents would have their own individual business licenses, I believe. And then how do we charge for those that have a structure or have a more communal living now?
Well, again, and I think maybe the answer to this could be is
we can historically tell you for probably the last 5 to 10 years how many businesses we've inspected annually. So we know that number exactly. And we're not going in and inspecting your real estate desk, your real estate desk, your real estate desk. We're walking into ABC Realty office and doing one inspection in there. So there may be, and I'm going to make up a number, there may be 30,000 business licenses in the town of Fountain Hills, and we may only do 1,000 inspections a year. And those are the ones who we feel are legitimate target inspections for the fire department to do. And so I would assume, and again, you know, we're very early into this process and the first time out of the gate, that that's probably what we would predicate our inspection cycle on, are those 1,000 businesses that we know that people are out there carrying on a legitimate storefront business, and those are the ones that we will continue to inspect, and those are the ones who will get the bill. We're not going to go after the other 29,000 people in town who have business licenses, unless you told us to.
No.
And so that's kind of the foundational level we're at right now. And as Mary said, you know, this is a new game for us in this town, in this fire department. We've never charged for anything. And, you know, we provided a great service to this community because not only does the residential community, but the commercial community doesn't pay a penny for our service unless they shop in town. So we felt that this was a great opportunity when there wasn't a lot of business activity going on, that we could start this program, give us a couple years to look at it to see what kind of feedback we would get, try to recover some of the cost of the fire marshal's office and the firemen who actually go out and do a lot of these inspections, and see if we just can't bring just a few more dollars back into our cost center in that. But again, you know, it's open up to a lot of interpretation. We're going to look for directions, and we know that if you feel strongly about something or have a good idea, you're not bashful on sharing that with us.
Thank you. Councilmember Brown.
Thank you, Mayor. One more thing you might put on your tick list. Firstly, I see absolutely nothing wrong with the fee. For the 3 or 4 employees that walk through my unit, 15, 20 minutes, it's cheap. For the insurance, it's cheap. But one thing you might want to put on your tick list is the 2 units that I have that were vacant, they also asked to go into, which of course I let them right in. So you're also inspecting some vacancies, and that fee would go to the building owner, or it's something that you might be faced with.
And that's a very good, Mayor, Councilman Brown, that's a very good point. And one of the reasons that we have started to do that is that this is going to be hard for you to believe, but we're finding out that there's people opening businesses in this town that aren't going down and pulling any kind of a license to open up a business here in town. And it's a shock, especially to us, but we found that to be true. And so when we have the opportunity to go into a commercial piece of property, we're going to look in there to see, are they getting ready to open up a business without us knowing about it. So I think that's just a little due diligence on our part, and I guess that's something to look at. Are we going to sock you for the extra $25 for each one of your storefronts, or will we just give it a pass on that just when we believe that there is no activity going on there, and we will wait for the TI permit to come in, and at the time of the TI permit will be the time the clock starts ticking for that fee, which I believe that's the way we would do it.
Thank you.
All right. Councilmember Contino.
Yes, I would like to know, on these, when you go down, like Plaza Fountainside, when you get into there and you take a look at that, most of these fees that you're going to be charging are covered in CAM costs by the person that's leasing the building. How would you do that if the CAM costs are there and they're paying for that service?
Mayor, Councilman Catino, I've never heard the word CAM cost, so
It's a triple net.
Yeah, okay. That would be something we would have to look at. Maybe that would be a roll-up cost for the the landlord of that building, we're not going to just charge them $25 to do 15 or 20 different occupancies.
No, I mean, the owner of the building would be paying for it, not the tenants, since they pay a CAM charge.
Well, then I would imagine that we could bill the landlord of that building one fee per year for each tenant that he has in that building.
Okay.
Councilmember Alke.
So this fee is only going to be charged if you do the inspection, is that correct?
That's correct.
So there may be some businesses that don't pay this fee because just by happenstance, or they're not licensed for one reason or another, then they won't be charged this annual fee.
We're going to do the inspection, Councilman.
I understand. No, I understand you're going to do the inspections. I understand perfectly, but you're only going to get charged if you have this inspection that's done.
Correct.
Okay. And this doesn't apply to residences or anything like that, of course not. Correct.
Mayor, council member, absolutely not. We have no authority to go into a person's single-family home and demand an inspection. They could call us up and they can invite us in, but that's the only way.
Okay. I'm just real hesitant to charge the businesses additional costs when we rely so heavily on the businesses in town as it is for the revenues. I just have some concerns about additional fees on top of the business licenses that we already charge as well. It just seems that it's not real clear, at least to me, as far as who's going to be hit with the fee, because in my building, my lease agreement, for example, the owner of the building is responsible for maintaining these sorts of things. Now, because I have a business license and you need to come into my office to do an inspection, obviously it includes the entire building. Now, am I going to have to pay the fee in addition to the building owner itself? It just sounds like that's what's going to happen. And correct me if I'm wrong here, Chief.
Mayor, Councilman, I guess it could be perceived that way. It's not going to be an exact science on how we bill somebody, because each shell building, the tenants could be totally different in that building. In your building, you could have your law office, and next to you could have a 4-star restaurant that has the full 9 yards going in there as far as fire protection system, and you name the different kind of occupancies they could have in there. So it's going to be a learning process out of the chute on how we charge this and how we collect this. Are we going to be perfectly on target every time? Most likely not, but we'll learn from our mistakes. We're certainly going to have to work with the finance department as far as collections go to make sure that it's fair and equitable. But we feel that coming in at such a low price of $25 is really a fair price to charge somebody for us to come in there and to make sure that they're doing the correct things to make sure that they stay in business. I'm not saying that people maliciously violate codes, but just sometimes they don't know or they forget, and we're the gentle reminder coming in and reminding them that these are the things that you have to do. And we really try to work with these people, and we have worked with these people over the years to try to get them to comply with the codes and get them to understand that if they don't do some of these things and they have a fire, guess what their insurance company is going to do? They're probably going to subjugate their claim to everybody but themselves, and that restaurant or that business may not end up collecting on their insurance company. So we feel that we have a vested interest to make sure that that business doesn't sustain a fire, or a business next to it doesn't sustain a fire. Will we be successful all the time? No. Is this a bad time of the season, with the economy being what it is, to come in and do this? Absolutely. But again and all, we feel that this is what we have to do. We are given a set of codes that have been codified and approved by the town council, and we feel that we have to honor that responsibility to carry out a code enforcement and do inspections, but try to be as user-friendly as we possibly can with the community. And I think that we've demonstrated over the past couple of years that we've probably bent over backwards maybe too much in allowing people to have a special amount of time to comply with the codes. But, you know, we are concerned, and we're open to any of your comments, and, you know, and we want to hear them and your suggestions, so we can put together a fee schedule that we feel is very competitive in the valley. And we meet our obligation to the fire codes and the building codes that we're sworn to protect and carry out.
Councilmember Belke?
But Chief, you're going to be doing these inspections whether you're charging the businesses $25 or not, correct?
That's correct.
And you're going to uphold the fire codes whether there's fees associated with that.
That's correct.
Okay. My only concern is again, what parameters this is going to be, whether it's 25 cents, $25, or $25,000. I would like to know what parameters that are going to be in place as a business owner that's going to make me susceptible to this fee. And I understand what you're saying as far as needing, you know, it's not always going to be an exact science, it's not going to be perfect, but I think anytime we're talking about taking money out of somebody's pocket, we need to make sure that we're clear on who it's going to apply to and who it's not going to apply to, and that's my primary concern here.
Mayor and Councilman Elke, I agree with you 100%, and at the end of this process, we will be clear. And we'll be clear with your direction.
All right. So right now, you're doing it because it's a code, it's a requirement of our town code to inspect businesses that are open to the public.
Mayor, yes, sir, that's correct.
And so right now, yeah, we're requiring it. The town is paying for it through our contract with our firefighters.
Mayor, that's correct.
Okay. So you're looking to bring the cost back in to and apply it to the business owners directly where the service is required.
Mayor, that's correct. And in reference to Councilman Elke, we want to make sure that when we do bill the correct person, and we want to make sure that that person isn't double billed. And some of this stuff is going to be a little new to us because we never billed before. And so, you know, we're going to be open to what businesses tell us. You know, maybe that's how we work our form up is, you know, there's a question on there. Do you pay, would you call it CAM fee or?
CAM.
CAM fee. You know, is there a CAM fee applicable? And that may be part of our business license, our fee collection questionnaire form, invoice, whatever we end up calling it. But we certainly don't want to double bill or triple bill anybody for our services.
Councilmember, did you have that? I was looking at it as whatever businesses you go in to inspect, you would be looking to let the town know there's a $25 charge due XYZ business that we just inspected today. And you, the firefighters, would know if it's a real estate office that it's just that office, not each individual realtor or whatever, but there's probably scenarios we can't even think of as to how they would come up. But like you said, you know how many you go through annually. You know that you find businesses that you inspect because you're still required to inspect them whether they have a license, business license or not. Then you give the town a heads up that they don't, there's a business without a license perhaps, or you advise the business that they need to get a license. I think, yeah, clarification on who would be charged and when. I think the CAM charge, just for your edification, is more of an HOA fee. It's a community area maintenance charge typically in a commercial setting. It's like an HOA fee. So I'm not sure how it would apply if you want to try to bill business building owners by how many businesses are in their shopping center or whatever it might be, because that would change, you know, annually, obviously, with vacancies and splitting of tenant spaces and on and on. But I guess more clarification of how that would be charged, I guess, would be more comforting to businesses in particular.
Mayor, again, we have a lot to learn on this, and never did I think the fire department ever thought that we were going to be the ones who were going to come up with the rules, regulations, policies, and how we invoice citizens on what we do. You know, we figured we'd get that marching orders from Mary. But again, you know, we're open to any comments, any suggestions, whether you want to do this or you don't want to do this. And, you know, if there's lease agreements out there that we're not familiar with, I guess we need to have some type of a vehicle that we find out what those lease agreements are, so we are fair and equitable.
Councilmember Dickey.
Mayor, I'm in favor of moving forward with this. They have come forth with this, they've got a finance person, and the inspector who, we give our lives to these people every day, we trust them. He's not going to go into a dentist's office and then go to the office next to it and then charge another one to the landlord. Why would they do that? There's only 2 inspections, they're going to do $25. I mean, I say go forward with this and we'll, you will work it out as it comes. You're professionals, you can figure it out. I really wish we'd move on.
And one last point.
Councilmember Elke.
Thank you. May I just ask you just a hypothetical scenario, because we're talking about this $25 fee, but I just want to ask you specifically, let's just use Phil's, for example, the new Phil's that's over there on Parkview now. And if you were to do a commercial automatic sprinkler system review, can that be an annual inspection as well?
Mayor, Councilman Tate, yes, but on Phil's at this point here, there would be other fees associated to Phil's at this point, because before he occupied that building, he had to come in and pull a TI permit. So we had to go in there and inspect his building, we had to go in there and inspect his hood system, we had to go in there and inspect...
I'm just trying to give you a hypothetical. Maybe that's just a bad example since he just moved, but could you go in theoretically and do a business, whether it's a restaurant or otherwise, and do a commercial automatic sprinkler inspection, a commercial hood system plan review, a commercial fire alarm plan review, and then an annual commercial safety survey all at the same time in one particular business?
Mayor, Councilman, what we would do is that some of those are required to be done twice a year by a licensed and bonded contractor.
Okay.
So we would go in to do our normal one-year annual inspection, and we would go up to their sprinkler riser, and we would go up to their hood system, and we would look for the tag on there. And if there was a green tag on there, we would look at the date of the tag to see when that service was performed, and we would duly note that on our inspection. If there was a red tag on there, we would certainly question them to why is the red tag on there and hasn't been replaced unless it's within the window of replacement.
Yeah,
So to answer your question, yes, we could do it all at once.
and that's why I asked, because when you combine all those fees together, it can get substantial, and that's why I asked the question.
I see what you're getting at. No, we're not going to go back 5 times and charge them $25. It's $25 for everything.
Okay, thank you.
Good, that helps. Councilmember Leger.
Yes, Chief, you can stay there because it may overlap, but I just want to address this to Mary. What do we charge a business for a business license annually?
Mayor, members of the council, there's a $50 application fee and then a $35 per year renewal fee.
Okay, so $35 a year for a business license once you have an established business, plus $25 for an inspection that may enhance the safety of your business is $55 a year for a business owner to be in business and be permitted and inspected is what we're hearing. It seems to me that the dollars are not that significant, and I think we're having a philosophical discussion here, whether we should be charging businesses or not, because the amount of money is certainly relatively low. So I would suggest that either we make a motion on this, that we move in this direction, or not and move on, because it's just become a circular argument. How does that business permit fee compare to other communities?
It's very difficult to compare because, there are communities that charge a % of gross receipts
Okay.
as a business license fee we've seen some where the permit fees are $1,000 for one type of business, and another type of business might be as small as $50. So they're all over the page.
But currently we're charging $35 for renewal, and we need to determine whether that's too much or not, and $25 whether that's too much or not. Frankly, I don't think it is. I would agree with Councilman Elke that we certainly need to work out the process. We don't want to double bill anybody. Councilman Contino mentioned that he's paying part of that fee, who's held accountable, is it him or is it landlord? I think there are some complexities that need to be worked out, but I think the charge is very reasonable. It's currently an unfunded mandate, and either we start charging fee for services in this town, or we just give, well, that's enough of that. Thank you, Mayor.
All right. Any other, Councilmember Brown?
Thank you, Mayor. I've got to say that we have neighbors that have been doing inspections and billing for ever, Scottsdale, Mesa, and I'm sure that we have, it's a misfortune, you've done an excellent job answering the question, but it's a misfortune that Randy isn't here to help us this evening, because I'm sure his investigation is much more in depth than what we know, and I would wager to say that Randy could have answered several of the billing questions, and that's really the only issue at this point in time. And if a motion is in order, is it? I'd have to ask. I'd have to make a motion to approve the fire safety fee schedule as represented on page 349 of the budget.
All right, we can do that. It's not necessarily a change, but we can motion on most anything. So we have a motion on the fire safety fees on page 349 to move forward as is.
Second.
All right, any other discussion here? What I wanted to, since Henry mentioned philosophical discussion, which it largely is, but generally, more generally, the work is already being done. The town is paying for it, looking to absorb the cost of what's already required. I'm not sure if the town could waive this requirement of businesses being inspected. I think that would be the discussion if there's ability for us to waive this requirement. I don't expect it'd be something most folks would be comfortable with, even if it was an option, because of protecting people that go into a public space. But the work's already being done. It's a cost recovery method, at least a portion of the cost recovery, which is minimal. So I don't think it's even really much of a philosophical discussion, because the work is being done. It's just who's paying for it.
Mayor, that is correct, and plus it's also one of our performance measures.
Okay, well, good. All right, we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion on approving these or accepting these fire safety fees? All right, all in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Mayor, 7-0.
All right, thank you. A motion, we had a motion. All right, we're on fees, so any other fee discussion items? Councilmember Hanson.
One fun fee.
Yes.
We have a fee for running the fountain.
Yeah, $250.
Would it be possible to add a fee to color the fountain?
There you go.
Do you get that request very often?
Cassie, what page, Ron?
Yeah, I saw that. It's $250 now for a fountain for a half hour, I think?
$350, yeah.
$350? Well, fountain operations, page 351.
Mayor Slum and members of the council. I only can recall getting a request for the town to do it more often. I don't recall somebody coming to us and actually wanting to pay for having the fountain colored. Can it be done? Yes. It is fairly expensive. We run about $1,500 per 55-gallon drum of dye. And it's obviously labor also involved in putting it in.
So it's cheaper to run it than color it.
Much cheaper.
Actually, I did have a citizen ask if they could have it pink for a cancer function.
I think absolutely. Come bring it to Parks and Rec and bring the idea forward, and I think they'd be all over it. Obviously, they're going to need some. They'd be happy to do it if the funding were available from the folks.
It's a fairly specialized product. We get our dye out of Ohio. It's trucked in. So it's an expensive proposition.
So if someone were to want to green the fountain, like for St. Patrick's Day, the business would work with Parks and Recreation and say, hey, we'll accept the cost. Just give us a little bit of, green fountain powered by X business, and, in whatever celebration there might be on, they may be included in that type of
Yeah, we have a standard facility use form that we ask folks to fill out, and so whenever there's a kind of an unusual request, we ask them to complete that form and then indicate what the special request is, and then we take a look at any and all of them.
Have you had funding, have you had anyone ask you to dye the fountain a certain color and offer to pay for it, and you have chosen not to do it?
Not that I can recall.
Okay. I mean, it might get carried away. We might have too many colors. Might change the whole fountain complexity of the fountain water. We'd have to watch that. But
Apparently, we did have a person that wanted to turn the fountain blue for a birthday party, and we turned him down on that one.
they didn't want to pay for it?
I'm not sure.
Brian, this is very, yes, come on now.
Let me rephrase that.
How old was
Brian
child?
turned him down.
Brian.
Mayor and Council, Mark's correct. It does cost about $2,500 for a 55-gallon drum of dye, so it is very expensive. We do get a few requests, and we consider them on a case-by-case basis. There was one to dye it blue for a birthday party, which we actually turned down. The only other one I know is pink for cancer research in October and green for St. Patrick's Day. And in the past, we've done school or class colors for graduation. So we've done a few special ones, but we try and limit that just because of the labor, the cost, and so that it doesn't get out of control, I guess is the best answer.
And maybe for managing it, you may not smile upon a request for a party of 10 birthday party that would probably draw in more questions as to what's going on.
Correct.
And benefit.
That is the other thing. We'd probably get a lot of questions from the general public as to why the fountain's blue or green or whatever on an unusual day. So.
Okay. Councilmember Hanson, what do you think?
I'm seat out.
All right. All right. Any other fee thoughts, discussions? Mary, thanks again. Great job. Staff, thanks again for, don't leave yet, but thanks for going through all these things, these items for us. All right, so Mary, do we have another area we're going into now, or is it just open?
Well, the last item that Council mentioned last week was the re-review of the capital improvement projects. The easiest way to look at the projects is to look at the funding fee matrix, which is
290. I believe it's page 290.
on page 290. And I'll take us through it very quickly. There are 3 projects in the downtown area scheduled for next year. 2 of the 3 are funded by the excise tax fund. 1 is being funded by outside donations. In the streets division, we've got a number of street projects scheduled. The one project for the Saguaro Boulevard Mill and Overlay has been reprogrammed for fiscal year 2011-12. The bulk of the funding coming for the streets projects are coming from grant funds, MAG funds, and capital project funds, and stimulus funds this year. We've got 1 traffic signal project. The source of funding there is the Capital Improvement Fund.
That's an upgrade, not a new signal.
Those are traffic signal upgrades. We spoke or at earlier meetings about that. We have software in the traffic signals that is no longer being supported, so it's an upgrade of all the signals throughout town. And that sets us up also for being able to have the signals communicate with each other better in the future. There are 2 general government projects. One's a voice and data communications project, and the second is the photovoltaic installation project that is coming from both rebates and grant funding. And then finally, we still have programmed the fire and emergency projects, the fire station relocation, and the fire station emergency generators. And both of those projects have small components of town match, but the bulk of the funding is coming from grants and stimulus funding.
Okay. Anybody have questions? I know we talked about some of these as we went through, for example, the downtown items, but anyone have questions on any of the capital improvement plan items? Councilmember Elke.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. Mary, do we know how long it's going to be before we get an answer from the Fed regarding the fire station relocation stimulus funds, and, perhaps how long, where we're going to tie up those funds?
Mayor, Councilman Elke, I had received a email from FEMA 3 weeks ago that told me that we should be getting our turn down letter, if we were going to get a turn down letter, within a week. It's been 3 weeks and we have not received a turn down letter. Quite frankly, I don't think anybody has received a turn down letter to this point here. I was told by our West Coast FEMA representative that they're having some difficulty and angst with this program because they're finding out that some of the awards that have been given out already have one or two things happen to them. Three things. One, they moved forward with it successfully. The second one is the community determined that they could no longer go forward with that capital project and returned the money. And the third thing is that some communities got so backwards with the federal requirements to meet the grant request, the federal government pulled the grant back for them. So I guess what they're trying to do right now is figure out exactly how many dollars do they really have left in this pot of money, who's performing, who's not performing, and who could possibly get the opportunity to perform with a grant award. So unfortunately, I have to stand in front of you all tonight and say, I guess we're still in the game. I wish they would have pulled the trigger 2 weeks ago, one way or another. It's extremely frustrating for me. It's extremely frustrating for you, the council, in your budget preparation, but technically we're still in the race. Thank you.
And Councilmember Ralph, you mentioned free up the money. It's only going to be spent if we get awarded it. So it's not, obviously, ERA dollars. We've already went ahead on the funding of the design so that we qualify for this. But good news is that you haven't been rejected yet, and you haven't lost. And if others are having challenges by having their grant application removed or have chosen not to move forward for whatever reason, then there are more dollars available potentially for us. And I suspect, like other road projects, projects are coming in under bid, which could free up some additional dollars.
And Mary, and one of the things that's kind of frustrating for us is that some of these things that they need to meet have already been met with the Shea project, the historical sites and floodplain and all these different kind of engineering things that need to be done have already been done and paid for under the Shea project, that we can just dovetail in for a couple of $1,000s to refresh those engineering studies to make our project viable. So it's kind of frustrating sitting there knowing that we do have a project ready to go, that we could be out to bid in 30 days on this project, and we're not being brought to fore on it. So it's kind of frustrating. I guess the good news is the other project, we did get the grant funding for that, the $60,000 from the federal government. So that's moving forward. But I look at it every morning, and believe me, as soon as we get the word one way or another, you'll know about it instantaneously.
Chief, it is true that majority of the people being awarded have already been awarded, correct? The majority of dollars?
Probably about 90% of it.
90%, yeah. So
they've only made 2 awards cycles.
Okay.
And the last one, there were quite a few very small communities, rural communities, that received these grants, and I figure those are the ones who probably kind of got stymied by the requirements of a federal grant contract, what they require you to do, and they just probably aren't used to doing anything that magnitude. And that's where they got in a little bit of trouble.
So our commitment also, which was unique, was to match a portion of their grant. Do we know if that's given us any better positioning?
Mayor, no, sir. They've been mute on it totally.
Okay. All right, thank you. Any other council members on any of the capital projects? Thanks, Chief. Councilmember Hanson.
Thanks, Scott. In the budget, it said that for the fire station, the complete set of design plans had been delivered and approved. And I was just wondering how some of the utility issues had been resolved, like where the sanitary is going to connect, where the decision was made, or...
Well, Mayor, Councilperson Hanson, on the federal plan, we put in the cost to go down Shea Boulevard. And that's why we asked for $2.2 million from the federal government. So we went in for the whole 9 yards, and there's a lot of fees in that. We can build that fire station for a lot less than $2.2 million, but there's a lot of requirements in there, duplicate engineering studies, auditing requirements, where the town has their own auditors, but seeing it's over $1 million, we have to bring in a different group of auditors to audit what they're doing and what that fire station project is. So there's probably $500,000 worth of stuff in there that we wouldn't have in there if we built that fire station ourselves. But seeing that we are going for a federal grant, we are going to go for the top dollar to do it.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I remember there was discussion how to get the sanitary to or from there. So as far as approved plans, there's not a building permit yet.
Mayor, there is a building permit.
There is a building permit already done, so...
Correct. But the engineering studies, the sewer stub stops right at Shea. It doesn't go in any one particular direction. And, like for our complete set of plans, we don't have the complete set of fire sprinkler plans yet. Those will be rolled into it later, but they are called out for it in the complete set of building plans.
So like a building plan, there's requirements before you get to certain points. You have to get compliance with. Is that something like this, the sewer system, the sanitary, is that on our building plans? How does that look right now? Or do you know offhand?
Well, again, our stub for the fire station goes out and it ends right on Shea Boulevard.
Okay.
So, it has to be determined at a later date which direction we go if that is our final building site.
Okay, so that's not been determined yet, but the expected cost to bring it in from Fountain Hills Boulevard is included in the
federal.
Federal, okay.
And again, it was based on a cost from the civil engineer that gave us that cost.
Okay.
From the town of Fountain Hills here. Not the town of Fountain Hills, Dave Montgomery.
Okay. All right. Any other capital improvement CIP questions? Thank you, Chief. Councilmember Hanson.
Thank you. Marion, it's under the street projects, the S6046 Fountain Hills Boulevard sidewalk. And that's between Cholla and Crystal Point. And I'm kind of questioning that particular sidewalk because there's no curb on Fountain Hills Boulevard at that point. And it seems like an odd stretch to just kind of put in there. And I think it's only in the design stage for fiscal year 10-11. I'm sorry, on page 290. And
I'm just looking for more of the detail.
it's on page 314.
Thanks.
Mayor, members of the council, this is part of that overall sidewalk gap fill-in project. I don't have all the details that Randy would have if he was here to speak to it. as you can see, most of the project in this next coming year is in the design phases of it. And it's a 2-year design phase, and then we'll see construction in the 3rd year. And that's about as much as I can tell you on it at this point.
I would just suggest that next time anybody drives down Fountain Hills Boulevard, look at that little stretch. It's a very, it seems like a sidewalk could be put in a better place.
There's also, it goes down to 1 lane each direction coming down the hill, correct? So there's still a soft shoulder, like you had mentioned, no curb. All optimally would be part of a more comprehensive improvement, I would think. Is that what your thoughts are as well as far as timing? With development of the future, state trust land, ultimately, we talk of improvement of Fountain Hills Boulevard, and this would seem more in alignment with that on the timeline, and maybe that's why they've got it budgeted for the construction in 12-13, but yeah, that is something maybe to get some
But
more.
I even question spending the $40,000 this year to design it.
Correct.
Some of the difficulty, Mayor and council members, with MAG projects is that the timeline with MAG is the timeline with MAG. Most of the projects that we do with them, we apply for, and you've seen those brought to you, we apply for the grant 5 to 6 years in advance of our estimated construction time, just to get it in the tip. And so I think a lot of times we may be a little premature, because when we come up to the top and the funds are available to us, might be a little outside of our preferred time frame. And so we continue to do the design and to keep the project moving so as not to lose the funding.
Just, that's one of those places you look at and you compare it to the stretch between Bashes and CVS, where you actually see people tromping across that piece of property. That begs a sidewalk, where this area doesn't.
Yeah, I agree. And it seemed like better, but it all down in the justification part of the budget document on page 315, it says that the town applied for a grant to construct the sidewalk and was awarded using some dollars. In 2009, the MAG allowed the project length to be shorter to better fit the grant funding. The $300,000 grant funds are available for construction in the federal fiscal year 11-12. Staff will apply it to MAG for an automatic 1-year deferral. The plan would then begin construction in 12-13. So it sounds like the bigger construction amounts may be already awarded to us in a grant. So by not, I guess, designing it, are we putting ourselves at risk of losing the grant? So I wouldn't want to, I agree with you. I mean, if we had our druthers, which one, and maybe that one's up for something coming down the road here soon. No pun intended, but.
And Mayor, that maybe brings up another thing about the sidewalk plan in general. Maybe we could have the opportunity sometime during the year to review that plan. Rick had mentioned that he didn't feel it had ever formally been approved by the council. It had been presented, but possibly not voted on.
Mayor, council, a few months ago, in cooperation with our town engineer and our public works director, we assembled a draft of a policy that would bring myriad factors into play and consideration when bringing you eventually a sidewalk for consideration. And among these are the character of the neighborhood, the topography, existing facilities, federal, state requirements, and a host of other factors. And we wanted to make sure that a decision to include a sidewalk on a capital improvement plan would not be based exclusively on its presence or its place on a map. And that's basically what our sidewalk master plan is. It's a map that has been designed, and my understanding, speaking to other staff, is that it was not formally adopted as a plan by the council, but it served as a guide for our town engineer and public works director to determine where the sidewalks probably ought to go, or give some indication of where we ought to look for sidewalks. Now keep in mind also that some of those determinations were based on the existence of certain pieces of ground throughout the town that have been designated for future schools as well. And so one of our priorities, in fact, our top priority in sidewalk construction is safe pedestrian conveyance. And we look primarily to where circulation is occurring or pedestrian traffic is around schools. Well, if the person or a firm that put together the sidewalk master plan saw a piece of ground that's designated as a school, that's probably going to trigger, therefore, some, sidewalks being drawn for that area in order to convey children to and from school. Again, whether those schools will ever be built, whether there exists facilities, utilities, and other obstacles in the way that would make a sidewalk very cost prohibitive, whether the street is already wide enough that you could utilize the shoulders for pedestrian and bicycle traffic. These are all factors that need to be taken into consideration, and our intention in the future, a circumstance like this, the Fountain Hills Boulevard sidewalk, when it's based on a 4-year-old grant that we've been working through, that's a little bit different. But as we move into the future and we consider sidewalks for construction, just be assured we'll use that policy in order to make sure that we bring you sidewalks that make sense and that aren't cost prohibitive.
Thank you, Councilman Leger.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but wasn't the sidewalk management plan used to develop the CIP plan? So we did in fact improve the 20-year CIP plan, so by default we approved the sidewalk plan. However, outside of that comment, I couldn't agree with Councilwoman Hanson more. I really think we need to come back to the drawing board, and we need to have a work study on this, and we need to look at that whole thing. I mean, we have sidewalks in area of town that are part of this plan that neighbors simply don't want them there, and they're not needed there. And we had that 6-month-long discussion with the resident up on, was it Sierra Alto? Mm-hmm. So I think this is timely, and I would really like for us to review the whole thing, and so I second that, you know.
And Mayor and Council, one of our initiatives this year and objectives is to create an urban trail master plan. And while the word trail may sometimes denote some type of natural surface, we're talking about, I think that it might be a very good idea to envelope in that same kind of review.
Good. All right, thank you very much. Anything, Councilmember Hanson?
Real quick on let me get the right number. On the Shea widening, it's project 6005, and that's going to be on page 303.
Thanks. 302.
302.
Yep.
And I know there had been some work, and this is basically the intersection of Saguaro and Shea. I know there had been a number of meetings with business owners around that area, and I think there had been some access issues of, where turn lanes would be, widening, that type of thing, and I just wondered if they had been worked out and resolved with all the businesses in that area.
Council members of the council, I was not a part of those activities, but I know that Tom Ward and Randy Harrell had a number of open houses with residents in that area to discuss all of their concerns about how that intersection was going to be reconfigured.
And Mayor and Council, I also recall Tom telling me about the amount of outreach that had been done thus far, and that this would continue as we get closer to the project and we move forward. And this is probably not something we can stop. We have to continue to follow through to the end of this project.
And this is again a 70% reimbursement project from MAG, if I'm reading it correctly, if I remember. We did have, council had fun dialoguing on turn lanes, I know, for a while, since we're the traffic engineers up here.
And this is the project, you remember, that creates that westbound new westbound side of Shea all the way from our town limits to where the Shea Gap project then picks up and then moves into the current project that you see being performed between Fountain Hills Boulevard and Palisades. So it's very exciting to get a new intersection out there. You get some new striping. I know there's been some confusion out there with regard to the striping on Shea. I find myself always turning into the wrong lane to turn right, way before, especially when it's dark, before I actually get to Saguaro. That probably never happens to you, but I'm always going to Señor Tacos, so that's why I go that way. But to have that's exciting for our town, all the way through our town limits. And we hope also to work with the tribe, with Fort McDowell, to see if they want to also join with us in paving their side also.
Good. On the sidewalks, I just wanted to mention, obviously, much of the development that's here was here before we were incorporated. And I'm not sure if it was a county rule or whatever it was, but it seemed to carry forward with the town, is that sidewalks, and why we have all these gaps, is largely because we have gaps in businesses. And businesses built the sidewalks when they built their property. So we have taken some strides and made an investment, and fortunately had a lot of grant monies as well, towards filling in these gaps, particularly in the business areas, before businesses are built, like the new one going that's either finished or just nearing completion along Saguaro. You know, it's terrific. We've always had that gap. Obviously, there's a little bit of room on the road, but not really the best for pedestrians. But I think we've always been waiting for businesses to come and, build their part of the sidewalk, and now we've taken a little more role in making sure that we do address these goals. Council, Town Manager.
And Mayor and Council, as you look at these sidewalks, and as we review possibilities for an urban trail plan, master plan, I'd also urge you to consider that there are options available to the town to go ahead and construct these sidewalks and then have a developer in the future participate in the construction or in the cost of those facilities. This is not unprecedented. And if we consider certain factors such as the impact of a lack of sidewalk on special events or on public safety, it might be a good idea for the council to consider in the future construction of sidewalks in these areas, and then with the option of perhaps recouping those costs at a later date when development comes in. I think that's very important for the aesthetic quality of our community and also for public safety.
Thank you. Did anybody sneak in with call the or speaker cards? Okay. Anything else on capital improvement plan, CIP? It's great to see grant monies, and I think it's great we'll be able to talk about the sidewalk plan here at an upcoming work study. Good. Anything else related to the budget you were going to go over, Mary?
No, that's the conclusion of the prepared presentation. I'm here to address any questions that the council has.
All right, thank you. Council, wide open now. Anything more to discuss related to the budget as it is before us? Councilmember Hanson.
Thank you, Mayor. When I started reviewing and making notes, one of the first things I came to, and it's like we have seen this plenty of times before, but on pages 42 and 43 where it talks about our public safety, and I guess more than ever this year, it just jumps out how much of our budget it is, at 46.5%. I know many of us have had separate ongoing discussions over the past year and a half about the possibility of at least exploring a district to fund our public safety services. I think that needs to be certainly a decision of the council whether or not we even want to look at that, but I think we do want to look at possible revenues in the next few years, and it just seems like this might be an area that would be worthy of some scrutiny to see, because I think it has the potential of, if we could do like a public safety district, it would free up a lot of the general fund money because it would be its own district. And I know there's a lot of questions surrounding it and, what it would turn out to be, but I guess it's just, is this something that we feel would be worthy of really taking some time at in the next fiscal year?
I think absolutely. Yeah, I think that's something that we want to put, as I've mentioned previously, we're looking at one of our goals, and as we heard from our Strategic Planning Advisory Commission, to get a Blue Ribbon Task Force committee put together to look at our financial sustainability. And I think that would be an obvious area for them to look into and understand what the opportunities are, the hurdles, the challenges, any unintended consequences, and those types of things. It doesn't need to be legislation, and I think we've got so many smart folks in our community that can give us some good ideas on financial sustainability. It was done previously, but obviously it needs to be looked at once again, given particularly where we're at and what we've now considering more or less our new normal. And public safety needs to have a sustainable financial model in particular. So is that kind of what you were thinking, Councilman?
Yeah,
Hanson?
but I'd really like to use the word expedite and, not get really bogged down in study, but let's just get, drill down on what could be done, what would need to be done. Could a community facilities district be used for this type of thing? The manager did confirm that you can have a town-wide CFD. And the possibilities, too, that would dovetail into we would finally be able to lower the sales tax back to 1.6, because when I went to 2.6, that was a direct result of assuming the fire district, and there was no way to pay for it, so that's when the sales tax increased.
Right.
But it was always meant to be temporary.
Good. Well, I'll noodle on that with the town manager and bring something back for you guys to consider. Does that sound good?
Okay.
Councilmember Dickey?
Mayor, as long as, I think two big issues with that is that it only saves money because it's a property tax. So it would have to be a property tax, whether it's community facilities district or, which I don't know if possible, or a fire district. It would obviously require that. So that it doesn't really go away. It just has to be paid for with a property tax. And it also removes the council as the governing body of public safety for the town of Fountain Hills. So I think before you move forward, because we know, I think, the nuts and bolts of what has to happen as far as signatures and things like that. But if there's a elected board, then that would be the board that would be imposing the tax and would be in charge. So if, like you said, if we get the nuts and bolts on what it would require, then we'd be able to go further. But to think that it would still mean that we have to pay for it, we have to pay for it somehow.
Sure. Councilmember Dickey and Hanson, I know I've heard a lot of different things, so I think that's what we'll have to get a group together or address as a council again and agendize it and consider it. I think you're probably a lot of folks on the same page there to talk about it.
And Jeannie, I wasn't referring to a separate fire district. It would be a district of the municipality. So it wouldn't be going back to what we previously had. It would be a brand new configuration. It would be under the council, wearing the district hat, just like the Cottonwoods.
I've heard that. That's what I heard discussion of. Good. Councilmember Contino.
Thank you. I think that it's time that we move forward on something like this because the residents that live here year-round are bearing the brunt of fire and police. In this way, we could have a special tax that would take care of every household here, whether they're a resident a month, the 6 months, or permanently. It'd all be shared equally by every person that owns property here in Fountain Hills. And I think it's time that we move forward on something like this. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Where are we? Any other items on in the budget for our special session on the budget? Property tax was mentioned, which led me to or sales tax was mentioned. Property tax was also mentioned. Bed tax is discussed, and I would just want staff to be prepared to talk about more or less in general, the general fund in general, with what we've talked about already, what we've modified, how are we doing with our balancing of the the budget for our next meeting. Are we in a hole we have to dig out of and find additional revenues? Are we going to have to increase fees? I mean, where are we at? And I expect you'd give us a bit of a heads up if we were already down that road to be worried about. But there's also discussion about an additional fees we're going to have to consider, particularly the increase in the bed tax at our next meeting. So if we can help council in advance of that understand what those dollars equate, not the bed taxes equate to, because I know you can't talk about that due to the individual businesses, but how we're doing on our balancing our budget through our discussions thus far.
Mayor, members of the council, from the changes that have been made to the budget so far and based upon the presumptions of the bed tax increase and the reduction in the transfer of construction sales tax to the CIP, the budget that you have before you is a balanced budget, so that it could be adopted at any time and there would be no negative consequences.
Okay. But we do have additional items coming before us on the next agenda that'll be following the budget adoption, which assume those items actually pass as well. So I just want to make sure council has the opportunity to meet with staff or individual council members to make sure they're comfortable with what's being assumed we're comfortable with, I guess is what I'm saying. So, Councilmember Leger.
Along those lines, I'm not sure if you said they will follow. The resolutions is what we're talking about.
Yes, the resolutions.
I would suggest that they proceed.
They have to.
Because if they do not pass, then we're going to have to adjust the budget real time. For example, if bed tax goes down, or if there's an adjustment to bed tax, then we're going to have to back out, 50 grand, 100 grand, so forth and so on. So I would suggest that those discussions precede the budget as you put the agenda together.
Well, either way, just make sure.
No, it shouldn't be either.
No, I mean, either way, we're going to be addressing those items.
Yes, but
So
I
no.
thought you said the budget discussion would precede those, and I think you want to precede those with the discussion on those two resolutions.
Well, in fact, I think it could, but then you wouldn't have the revenue to spend in the budget. Even though you've accounted to expend that much money, you'd realize you wouldn't have the revenue to spend. And so you'd be back here trying to figure out what to do, even after you've adopted a budget that same night. But the main thing was to make sure that the resolutions are understood by council so that they're going into that meeting understanding exactly what's assumed. Anything else on the budget? Councilmember Hanson.
Thank you. We tossed around at a couple of earlier meetings about the vehicle replacement program and the possibility of maybe foregoing putting money in there this year and freeing up about $142,000. And I don't know if that could just go into the general fund contingency or someplace where there would be, if a resolution didn't pass next week, that there would be those additional funds to fall back on.
Town Manager?
Mayor and Council, we have talked about the possibility of foregoing or bringing those funds back out that we had originally designated for vehicle replacement. My last report from Julie indicates that may not be necessary this year. We'll continue to monitor that situation. Obviously and ideally, we would like to continue along the path of putting money away to replace our fleet. We think that is critical. That's very important. But that is a ripcord that is available if we should need it all. We'll let you know exactly when we pull that if we have to.
And on our state shared revenues, how is the census working out as far as the updated counts, and how would that and when would that impact?
The census itself, there are a lot of revenues that we receive, well, I shouldn't say a lot, but a lot of our revenues are based on our population, and we're obviously very interested in what the census has to say with regard to our population. We're encouraged that so many of our residents did participate, have participated in the census so far, and we won't know the full impact of what that will mean on our revenues until we do get that number, but clearly we're very, very interested in that number.
Do you know the time frame?
No, I don't, do you?
I think I think it's quite a while. I think it's November of
Yeah.
11 when we'll actually get our numbers from the Fed.
I don't think this will be an immediate impact on us, but we'll be watching it very, very, very closely.
When I heard the timeline, it surprised me how far out there it is.
With all our technology, it takes that long to count the people.
It goes to the president, and then there's like 7, 6, 8 months before it actually gets rolled out to the states and cities.
And there is an appeal process too, so.
But also in general, Fountain Hills is approaching build-out, and in the past, Arizona was building out, it was adding citizens quite dramatically, so we were, I think, beginning to see a trend. We still were growing in population, but our share of the revenue pie from the state shared revenues was starting to decrease because other cities were increasing at a greater pace. So I think that's something to be expected since we will certainly hit build-out. We have some constraints here. Good. Other items? That's it for our agenda. Any other items on this? We'll have one more chance, obviously, for public and for council to talk about the budget at our next regularly scheduled third Thursday meeting, which is what date? Is that
17?
17th?
17th, yeah.
And that meeting will also have our two districts on just prior to our regular session to talk about the budget and other items as well. Any other questions, comments? Thank you, Mary, and thank you again, staff, for helping us understand the details, and we'll look forward to our next get-together. I look for a motion to adjourn. And a motion and a second. All in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Thank you.